In the opening scene, we are introduced to a couple on holiday in the Polish countryside. Joe and Laura are revealed to be former top American secret operatives who retired early to focus on developing a meaningful life together. Two French tourists, also on holiday in the region, notice Joe and Laura having breakfast. The four engage in casual conversation, sharing experiences about their lives and jobs. When the female traveler, who works as a doctor, inquires about Joe and Laura's vocations, the couple lies about their past, claiming to manage a small shop. After breakfast, Joe and Laura return to their accommodation. Joe suggests they join the other tourists to explore the countryside, but Laura declines due to illness. She encourages Joe to go without her. Before departing, Joe secretly takes a firearm with him as a precaution. The group, guided by a local guide, heads deep into the jungle. Meanwhile, two CIA personnel are on a reconnaissance plane flying towards the same woodland that Joe and the tourists are exploring. Suddenly, a shot from behind sends their plane crashing into the trees. Joe, upon hearing the explosion, rushes to investigate. Back at the lodge, Laura sees dense black smoke rising from the forest and becomes anxious for Joe's safety. She immediately sends him a message via satellite phone. Joe and the tourists discover the crashed plane. Joe and the doctor examine the pilots but find them all dead, shot in the head. They realize this was no accident. The plane was deliberately shot down. Joe, a former senior agent, recognizes the pilots as CIA personnel and finds a hard drive in one of the agent's pockets. The doctor protests, arguing that the hard drive doesn't belong to him, but Joe insists it contains crucial secrets. Unknown to them, the plane's radio continues to function, transmitting their conversation to CIA headquarters. The CIA overhears Joe talking about the hard drive, which contains devastating evidence of the CIA chief's wrongdoing. The CIA head demands to know the crash site location, which is in the Polish countryside. Joe urges the doctor and other tourists to return to the lodge as the location is no longer safe. Before they can leave, a band of mercenaries approaches them. Orland, the mercenary leader, questions the guide about their presence. When the doctor refuses to answer Orland's questions, he brutally murders her. He then confronts Joe, asking if he found a hard drive among the wreckage. Joe lies, claiming to know nothing about it despite having hidden it on his person. Orland raises his gun at Joe, trying to determine if he's lying, but Joe remains calm and composed. As Orland's soldiers search the crashed plane, Joe seizes the opportunity to escape. He steals one of the enemy's vehicles but runs out of gas in the middle of the road. Fortunately, Joe quickly takes a motorcycle from one of the mercenaries and rides away. The narrative shifts to an elderly man named Chester, who, like Joe, is a secret spy but still actively serving the government. The CIA boss contacts Chester and assigns him to apprehend Joe in the Polish countryside. Chester questions the order, noting Joe's retirement 5 years prior. The CIA chief reveals that Joe stole a vital hard drive belonging to the agency and offers Chester double his usual salary to recover it. Chester accepts the mission. Meanwhile, Orland, having lost track of Joe, threatens to kill all the vacationers at the resort, including Laura, if Joe doesn't surrender. Joe, hidden nearby, overhears the threat and immediately contacts Laura by satellite phone, warning her of the danger. Laura, a former top-secret spy herself, goes into combat mode, gathering weapons and preparing to fight. She advises the visitors to hide for safety. 3 of Orland's men burst into the lodge, but Laura dispatches them with precision and skill. Chester arrives at a rural hotel and tests a poison he's created by giving it to his driver, who collapses and dies shortly after. Joe breaks into a shop to rest and uses the landline to call the CIA chief. He demands to know what's so crucial about the hard drive, wondering why so many people are after it. The CIA head claims it holds sensitive government data, but Joe already knows it contains evidence of corruption among high-ranking officers. Joe makes it clear he intends to make the contents public, causing the CIA boss to panic. He traces Joe's call and contacts Chester with the location, urging him to assassinate Joe and retrieve the hard drive. Chester approaches Joe in the shop. Joe calls Laura to apologize for causing turmoil by grabbing the hard drive, explaining that he did it to expose corruption. Laura fully supports his decision and assures him she can handle herself. Just as the call ends, Chester arrives. They greet each other as old acquaintances, exchanging pleasantries. Chester asks about the hard drive, and Joe lies, saying Orland had already stolen it. Chester remains unconvinced and calmly suggests Joe hand over the drive to avoid confrontation. Chester pours 2 drinks and offers one to Joe, who refuses. Joe asks Chester about Orland, wanting to know why so many people want the hard drive. Chester reveals that Orland works for Russian intelligence, but Joe suspects the hard drive contains corruption data rather than essential American secrets. Chester responds indifferently, stating his primary goal is to complete his task and receive payment. Meanwhile at the lodge, Orland's men hold tourists hostage. Lara moves discreetly, eliminating guards one by one. Eventually, they corner her, but she uses a hidden knife to escape. After defeating several guards, Lara confronts Orland's right-hand man, who eventually overcomes her. He questions why Americans like Lara act invincible, to which she replies she's actually German and that she and Joe were once the world's most formidable secret operatives. The right-hand man realizes Lara is Joe's wife and directs her to contact Joe to demand the hard drive. When he returns her satellite phone, Lara quickly types a code that triggers an explosion. Orland and his men track down Joe and Chester. A local peasant had revealed Joe's location. Orland sends 3 men to confront Joe, but they hesitate, aware of Joe's capabilities. Orland, enraged, kills them. Inside, Chester asks Joe for help standing up, complaining of back pain. When Joe reaches out, Chester stabs him with a syringe containing poison, giving Joe 24 hours to live unless he gets the antidote. Chester promises to provide it if Joe hands over the hard drive. Chester creates a diversion by shooting a nearby power pole, causing darkness. Orland's men open fire and use smoke grenades. During the chaos, Chester detonates a grenade to escape, but drops the hard drive. Chester quickly grabs it and hits Joe before fleeing. Joe, weakened and outnumbered, fights the mercenaries. A grenade explodes, throwing Joe into the air. Orland approaches Joe, questioning why he didn't simply hand over the hard drive. Joe asks why it's so important, and Orland explains that it contains evidence of wrongdoing by CIA officials. Orland shot down the CIA plane to steal the hard drive, revealing they share the same goal to expose corrupt American officials. Joe proposes they work together to track down Chester, who is likely heading to attack Lara. Joe calls the CIA director, threatening to expose his corruption. The CIA commander mentions that Chester has the hard drive and taunts Joe about being poisoned. Joe reveals the poison didn't fully affect him. Enraged, the CIA boss orders armed drones to eliminate Joe and Orland. 2 drones appear above the Polish countryside. Despite their efforts to escape, their car crashes. They manage to destroy 1 drone, but Orland betrays Joe, aiming a gun at him. Before Orland can fire, Lara shoots him. The remaining drone attacks, causing a massive explosion, but Joe and Lara escape with serious injuries. The next morning, Joe takes Lara to a nearby lake. Her wounds from the earlier duel make her weak, but Joe treats her injuries. Chester suddenly appears, feeling weak. Joe reveals he actually poisoned Chester, not himself. He offers Chester the antidote under one condition: return the hard drive and help bring down the corrupt CIA officials. Chester has no choice but to agree, and the unexpected trio forms an uncomfortable partnership with a common aim: